Oh, hey, when did you get here? So a few months ago, I did a film called something like Why to Do Photography Projects, long-term projects. And if you remember at the time, I threatened that I would come back and do a film about how to do long-term photography projects, which is what this is, part one of what will be a two-part series. So before we start, there's a couple of things I need to preface. I've screwed this recording up so many times, you can't believe it. I hope it works this time because I'm pretty much at wit's end. I'm just one guy. My thoughts on this, my style, my technique are just that. They're mine. They may work for you, they may not. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. Number two, did you really think I would do this film in color? No. The other point I want to make is that when I talk about long-term projects, I'm talking about attached long-term projects as opposed to detached long-term projects. I think all of us at some point in our career do detached projects. I would call these filler projects. They're things that make us kind of feel like we're moving along, we've got something to do, but they're nothing that's going to end up in your career box at the end of your life. This could be a street photography project where there's no engagement with the people you're photographing. There's not a lot of time required, no access, no permission, no emotional involvement. It's just kind of banging away on the street. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not so interested in those projects. I'm interested in what I would refer to as attached. Now, as an example, and to set the table here, because literally I am sitting at a table. Just look over there. Go ahead. It's okay. Don't worry. It's my house. It's a little messy, but you're welcome to look around. There's a bookshelf right there. We moved in here right as the pandemic was unfolding. We have somewhere between 350 and 400 photography books that we really don't have room to put on display. They're still in the bins. But I took two random bins, pulled them out, and put the contents on that shelf just to make myself feel good and to be able to look through these things. I want to give you a list of names of people who are represented on that shelf by their books, and also remind you that there is not a single book on that shelf from a detached photographer. Every single project, every single book is from a photographer who emotionally invested at a level that would probably surprise some of you in terms of the level of commitment, time, resources, energy, emotional involvement. In no particular order, Rebecca Norris Webb and Alex Webb, it's a husband and wife, they're both great photographers, great storytellers. Jim Nachtwey, considered by many to be the most important conflict photographer of the modern era. Two or three of his books over there, some of which are like seriously big books. Anthony Schwa, an American photographer, I'm getting ready to do a highlight one of the books he did. He's fantastic. Gary Boas is a photographer that many of you probably don't know. Gary is a very peculiar guy who did a project that maybe is the best explanation of being emotionally involved with your subjects that I've ever seen. He's a really wonderful guy as well. Gene Richards, Norman Mouskoff, who's here in Santa Fe, he's got half a dozen books. I love his work. Larry Towle, Magnum photographer. David Taylor, who's based, I believe, in Arizona. He works a lot on the border. His book that I have on the border is remarkable. Andrea Modica, Greg Gorman, Peter Beard, who passed away recently, Paul Fusco, Jean Galmi, these are Magnum photographers, Maggie Stieber, who did a book called Dancing on Fire, which influenced me greatly when I was coming up as a photographer. Art Brewer and his book on Bunker Spreckles, and if you don't know that story, look up Bunker Spreckles and talk about a relationship between photographer and subject. Hilarious and a great story. Monique Stauder, who did a book on the equator, Glenn Denny, if you're into rock climbing, you'll know him. Chris Still Perkins, Edward Bertinsky, one of the best fine art people working today, Donna Ferrato, Alex Soth, Henry Horenstein, and Sarah Terry. And Sarah Terry did a 10-year recap of her Aftermath project. And again, if you're looking for attached work, emotionally invested, Sarah did a project called the Aftermath Project, did a 10-year recap. Look up both Sarah Terry and Aftermath Project. You'll get an idea of what I'm talking about here, right? So these are not dabblers. These are not, how do I put this politely? There's gonna be tough love today. There's gonna be tough love. If you can't handle it, just go maybe eat some Vegemite and forget about watching the rest of this film. These are not dabblers. These are not online photographers. These are working pros who are going out and spending every penny they have on committing to projects. It's remarkable. These are the people that inspired me when I was coming up, and they're the people that still inspire me now. So let's move on here. We're at 5 minutes. If this camera works, so the first time I recorded this, the camera cut off and I didn't know it. The second time I recorded this, the focus didn't work for some reason. The camera's exact same position. So my luck with this stuff is running on zero. So if this works, it'll be a miracle. I'm guessing right about Now this will cut and go to another segment. I don't know. Let's talk about points. These are tips, ideas that I think you should think about if you're going to do these long-term projects. Number one, drum roll please. Choose a topic you love. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, Milner, you're an idiot. Why would I choose a project about something I don't love? But let me tell you what happens. Photographer A goes over here and does a project that gets success, gets a little buzz, gets some press, maybe even gets a little online chatter. 50 other photographers will go, maybe I'll go do a project like that. They don't do the exact same project. They don't copy it exactly, but they do a derivative project because they've seen that project get success. This happens all the time. It's been happening since I picked up a camera. It's far worse today than ever before. And there's also not shame associated with it today like there was before, which is a very peculiar indictment of our culture and society, but that's the way it is. You can kind of go clone someone and claim it's your own and no one seems to bother. I'll give you an example. I used to go to Paris Photo frequently, which is the biggest photo show in the world in Paris in November of every year. A few years ago I went and there was a project by someone named Peter Hugo. That was a great body of work, great book, great story, great exhibition, wonderful. It was kind of like the belle of the ball, if you will. The following year I go back, and as I'm coming into the main building where Paris Photo is, I start to see projects that were clearly derivative of what Peter Hugo had done. That's kind of what I'm talking about. And I get it because they're chasing the market. They're chasing the market for these photographs and these stories. And if that was successful, maybe this derivative one over here would be successful too. My point, don't do that. Don't be a person that does the derivative. It's better to fail on your own than it is to succeed on the back of someone else. That's the truth of the matter as a photographer. Again, did I mention the tough love? There's going to be more. Point number two, for the love of God, and I'm going to say that expression over and over again, even though I am not religious at all. For the love of God, take your time. There is absolutely no reason to be in a hurry unless you're on assignment. Now, I'm guessing 99.9% of you who watch this film on YouTube are never going to be on assignment. You're hobbyists, amateurs, consumers, prosumers, etc., and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I think there are many advantages today to not working as a professional photographer. Photography is a lot more fun. Take me, for example. I would never go back and work as a photographer now. No interest in that. There's far too many advantages to being outside that world. Take your time. Not only will your photographs be better, but your experience will be better, and the people that you're photographing react to your energy. And if you're rushed and pushing and trying to get images, they will respond by typically closing the door in your face or just saying, look, I don't want to work with you anymore. So do not be in a rush. Our society is all about being frenetic for no reason. We fabricate reasons to be overloaded, overly busy, multitasking. None of that works and none of that helps for long-term projects. All right, we're sort of warming up now. Are we feeling a little better about ourselves? Point number three. And you notice how I have to label these and number these? That's all YouTube shtick, right? Because the YouTube powers that say, well, you got to do this and you got to recap and all that. I don't really have to, but it helps me keep it straight in my head, especially when I'm screwing up the recording over and over and over again. Point number three is there's no substitute for time and access. The more time and the more access you have, the better your work will be. And I have not found ever any way around that fact. Let me repeat that. Take it easy. Calm down. More time, more access, the better the photographs will be. That's the rub. So time, we're all pressed for time again. So doing long-term projects is not something you want to go into rushed. Secondly, access is not as easy today to get as it was a few years ago. A few years ago, you could easily get access. And I can tell you stories of people letting me in their house, photograph things that you would not believe. I've had people invite me in to photograph illegal activities, like crimes happening. That doesn't happen much anymore, especially if you're working on anything that's sensitive. There's so many people running around with cameras doing, I'll just say it, idiotic things, that it's sort of put people on edge as to what your motivations are and what you're doing. There's also a huge misconception about the fact that you're gonna photograph them and get rich. I've heard that for years. Oh, if you take these pictures of me, you're gonna get rich. And when you explain to people that you're losing money on the project and that there probably is no chance ever for you to make back that profit, it can actually make it more difficult because they can't understand why you would do something that would cost you money. That happens all the time. So anyway, choose something you love, take your time, unless you're on assignment. And time and access, there's no substitute. All right, I'm gonna stop this and kickstart another thing if it worked. Oh, I'm back. That was intermission. I'm back now. Okay, point number 4, I mentioned this, tough love. Brace yourself because this one is gonna be mean. It's gonna be a little mean, but you deserve it. You deserve it. I was gonna drop an F-bomb here, and I might still, but I don't know all the regulations about YouTube and what happens if I drop an F-bomb, but you deserve it. Now, normally I would say that I deserve it, and I probably do 100 things a day that deserve an F-bomb being thrown in my direction, but this is not one of them. And not all of you deserve this, but some of you do. Do your effing research. If you're going to do a long-term documentary project, you have to do the research to understand the context of where your work fits in. What has been done before? Where does your work fit in? What can you learn from what else is already out there? And not just in photography, but just in the educational space in general. And I'm going to give you some examples of this. But over the years, I've heard so many photographers, especially at portfolio reviews, when they're showing me their work and I start asking questions and they get really squirrely. And they'll say something like, oh, I don't want to be tainted by knowing about anything else because, and then they fabricate some just elaborate nonsense about how they're original and nobody's done something like they've done, etc. And the translation of that is, I don't want to know, right? I don't want to work that hard, number one. And number two, I don't want to know because we want to think our work is original. And if you find out that somebody's already walked in those paths and already gone down that road, sometimes you can go, oh, wait a minute, maybe my stuff's not original. But the truth is, it's incredibly unprofessional to not do your research. You've got to do a minimum amount. The part that gets lost is that research is a lot of fun. Get this, stay with me here, okay? Take a deep breath, calm down, stay with me. Learning, good. Learning, good. Education, good. Let's say you're at a party and you're in the corner putting out the vibe. You're standing there with your cocktail and people are like, wow, that guy's really smart. I want to talk to him. That works to your advantage. So it's fun. Let me give you an example. I have 2 ongoing projects, one in California, one in New Mexico. Let's start with California. The California project, I simply went in the field, made an observation, and said, wow, that's really interesting. And the clock started running on my research. The story has a mechanical part, a natural part, and a written part that's not necessarily based in fact on the other 2 parts. The mechanical part, I have to know what I'm looking at. I have to know it in detail because the people who are interested in this project know more about the mechanical part than I ever will. I've got to get myself up to a level where I can be in the conversation. Same for the natural part. I knew zero. I didn't know anything about it. I started researching. Now I know a lot more. The written part, even though it's not based on fact, I've spent more time researching that than I have the other 2 parts combined. So that's sort of the basic level. I don't know when I'll be able to get back to California. It could be a year. I will be doing research on the project the entire time before I can get back to shoot. That's just par for the course. If you're not doing it, it just makes you look like an amateur. All right, point number 5. You guys ready? We've got a few more. I'm exhausted, frankly. Point number 5 is for the love of God. Second time I'm going to drop this. Let me just repeat that. All caps. For the love of God, do not share your work in real time. Let me repeat that. Do not share your work in real time. I know this is counterintuitive to everything you're hearing from the professional photo industry, and it's certainly counterintuitive to everything you're hearing from the, quote, online professional, not so professional photography community. If you share your work in real time, you are watering down the story, you are watering down your brand, and you are bugging the living hell out of everyone around you. What you're doing is you're tapping everyone on our shoulders all day long saying, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. And then at some point, ultimately down the line, when your entire body of work is complete, then you're expecting us to literally stop what we're doing and give you undivided attention, even after you've been bugging us relentlessly month after month after month. It doesn't work. If you show 6 images of a 50-picture story, people are going to say they've already seen the work. I think if you show 2 pictures from a 50-picture story, you'll have people that said, oh, I've already seen all that. I don't want to pay attention to it. So don't share it in real time. Everyone in the industry is telling you to do this because they're lazy. They want every single creative in the same funnel so that when they're looking for people to work with, they only have to look in one place. They're sitting in production meetings on cell phones like zombies going like this. People don't want to take the time to look at websites. They don't want to read anything. They're looking for following numbers. It's a disaster out there. Do me a favor, don't share it in real time. You'll be much happier. Plus, how do you expect to make great work in such a short amount of time? And how do you expect to make great work so frequently? That doesn't happen, right? What you're making is content, not photography. 99% of what you see in the photography world now is content. It's stuff your brain has seen 10 million times. It's not photography. What you're after on a long-term project is photography, and it's not easy. It's incredibly difficult and incredibly rare that great photography is made. So just keep that in mind. Just relax, take a tranquilizer, whatever it takes. Point number 6, get editing help. Most of us don't edit our own work very well because we're too emotionally attached. We were there, we heard it, we smelled it, we saw all the peripheral things that a viewer doesn't know about. So oftentimes we'll get married to an image, oh, this is the best thing I've ever done. And an editor will say, doesn't work in the story. And you have to be able to emotionally detach yourself at that point. And that's where an editor, someone who can help with sequencing or designing or a combination of all three is critical. A mentor is a wonderful thing to have. A mentor is better than you. They have maybe more books than you do. They have more industry experience. They have more expertise. They have a better understanding of the field. You may have to pay them cash, but that's fine because they can set you back on the right path. I have a variety of people, mentors that I have scattered around the world. I've taken photo workshops, become friends with the instructor, and we've sort of maintained a relationship over the years. I also have local people here that I can put work in front of and say, am I on the right track or is no one else going to understand this kind of thing? It's critical. That is way more important, way more strategic than putting an image on Instagram and then huddling in a bathroom stall counting how many people hit the like button. That's all caps, lame. Last print, and God knows if this is still recording, go to print even if you don't. And what I mean by that is mocking up a printed piece from your project is a great way of applying critical thought to your work that you typically will not do in the digital space. And I've seen this across the board from photographers all over the world. There doesn't seem to be nearly as much intent with online portfolios, with online exhibitions than there is with printed pieces. Print is going to force you to choose a cover image, an edit, a sequence, typography, write the copy, figure out how to design it. And most importantly, it's going to tell you what's good enough to make the project and what's not. And that, in essence, is the critical point. Because here is, if you boil down what you're doing as a documentary photographer, here's the rub. You are trading in attention. You are asking for undivided attention in a world that does not want to give it under any circumstances. Everything in our culture now is designed to create short attention spans. So long-form documentary photography, I think that's one reason why it's more important today than ever before. If you can win in this game, if you can win the battle of attention, you have done something remarkable, because most of the great work today is not considered at a level it once was because there's too much peripheral noise. There's a television behind me. Granted, it's not plugged in and it doesn't work, but if I was high tech, I might be able to set it up and actually get like, Columbo. For those of you over 50, you'll know what I'm talking about. I also have the internet, which is endless. And I've got numerous distractions. There's a hawk nesting right here that I'm going to go out later. So you're competing with the hawk for my attention for your work. It's not easy. Those were the 7 points, dramatic effect. Those were the 7 points. I'm not going to recap them. I think you can all go back and recap them on your own. I don't need to YouTube the end of this film. Humans have been telling long-form stories since the discovery of fire. That is a remarkable thing, right? It's in our DNA. It's not easy. It's complicated, it's emotionally investing, it can be financially investing, time investing, etc. But that's what makes it so good, attached projects. If you've never done one of these before, it doesn't matter if you're consumer, prosumer, hobbyist, amateur, whatever, everybody is capable of doing this work. Everybody is capable of having something to say and presenting it in a way. I know because I've been watching these stories come through Blurb for over a decade. There's a lot of remarkable people who are unknown as creatives who are telling great stories. That's what it's about. So I will be back with part 2. Part 2 is going to address the idea that you have chosen a topic and you're petrified. You're at home and you're clutching something. You're clutching a giant piece of furniture because you're paranoid, terrified to go into the field and start the project. That's where part 2 is going to come in. I'm going to give you some pseudo actual field techniques that might help you start building a photo essay. Until then, good luck.